of Work, co-sponsored by the Taunton Area Chamber of Commerce and the Cranberry Country Chamber of Commerce. We do this, our chambers collaborate often through networking, like we will next week. We've got August 9th, Business After Hours together at the Jockey Club in Raynham. Hope to see you all there. And in education and also in these legislative events with legislative advocacy. So I'm Valerie Glynn. I'm the president of the Cranberry Country Chamber of Commerce. And let me introduce Pam Desira of Cranberry Country Chamber of Commerce. And Lisa she's behind the curtain. And of course, the president of the Taunton Area Chamber of Commerce, Chris Silva, to introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you very much, Val. Yes, a pleasure always to get together with our friends at Cranberry Country. And I really want to thank the Senator for taking the time this morning. We're so fortunate to have you joining us. And Senator Lesser co-chaired the Future of Work Commission and will review the report's key findings with us this morning. Following the remarks, you will have the chance to ask questions. You can put your question in the chat, or if you would like to introduce yourself and ask the question directly, please just indicate that in the chat and we'll call on you to do that. So Senator Eric Lesser represents 9 communities in the 1st Hampton and Hampshire district, proudly serving Western Massachusetts in his 4th term in the state Senate. As Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Economic Development and Emerging Technologies, Lesser's legislative agenda focuses on the fight for greater economic opportunity and quality of life for Western Massachusetts, with initiatives around passenger rail, education, job training, innovation, and economic recovery and reinvestment in response to COVID-19, with a particular focus on Western Mass and the gateway cities. Prior to becoming a state senator, Lesser worked in the Obama White House, first as special assistant to senior advisor David Axelrod, and later as director of strategic planning for the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Lesser began as a young aide on President Obama's historic 2008 presidential campaign, traveling to 47 states, 6 countries with then Senator Obama and his senior team. Lesser has a law degree from Harvard Law School, a bachelor's degree in government from Harvard College, and is a member of the Massachusetts Bar and Federal District of Massachusetts Bar. Senator Lesser lives in Longmeadow with his wife, Allison, 3 children, Rose, Nora, and David. It is my great pleasure to introduce Senator Eric Lesser.
Well, thanks so much, Chris, and thank you, Valerie and Pam, and everybody for joining and for the invitation. It's very exciting to talk to the Taunton region and of course Cranberry Country. If you're ever in my neck of the woods, I'll give you some maple syrup. We'll swap cranberries for maple syrup. That's our local staple. But I do really want to thank you all for the work you're doing and really appreciate the opportunity. Just a little bit of quick context on me. We actually come from similar regions. I'm in the greater Springfield area. For people who might not be familiar with Springfield, it's a large city, a diverse city. My Senate district includes some of the densest urban communities in Massachusetts. I also have a town without a stoplight. We have a large manufacturing base and manufacturing history, just like you have in the Taunton area. But we also have a really proud agricultural history and a lot of small farms and a very important agriculture sector. Similar economies. We're also used to maybe being ignored just a little bit from Beacon Hill and not necessarily getting the attention and focus that we've always needed from the State House. So that's something that we kind of share. And I thought what I would do, Chris, is I'll just dive into the findings of the report. We can share the link, if you don't already have it, to all of the materials, all the hearings we did, all the testimony that was submitted, and of course, the final report itself is all very well organized on one page. And Molly, she's ahead of me. She already shared it. But what I thought I would do is just give a little bit of context on why we set this up in the legislature, and then run through the key findings. And then, of course, just kind of take questions and have more of a conversation. So just for a little bit of context, we actually got this started before COVID. This was legislation I had filed back in 2020, but 2019. Pre-COVID, it was included in an economic development law that Governor Baker signed in January of 2021. And it was really like a blue ribbon commission, 17 members across government, across academia, across business, across nonprofits. And it was across government, the appointments. The governor had a set of appointments. The Attorney General had a set of appointments. The House and the Senate each had a set of appointments. And the question we were charged with asking is, what is our economy? What is our workforce? What is work itself going to look like in Massachusetts 5 and 10 years down the line? And most importantly, what do we need to prepare for on a policy level in Massachusetts to make sure we're equipped for all these changes and making sure that we're protecting workers and protecting our economy along the way. So there's just a couple of kind of key things that we found. We did hearings across the state. We also did several virtual sessions, and we did quite a lot of deliberation among the commission members who had significant expertise in their own right to come to our findings. So just a couple of things, and then we can dive into questions and more of a conversation. This is probably not a surprise, but technology is literally eating everything. And there, I think, has been a misperception that the technological innovations are primarily geared towards white collar or higher end workers, like all of us on Zoom. But what we found is technology is being integrated at a rapid pace in every type of employment. So a retail clerk is now expected to know a computer software, for managing an inventory. A restaurant worker is expected to know how to use Toast, right, which is a software program for restaurant billing and order management. Manufacturing workers are expected now to learn new computer software programs, new advanced machining equipment on an almost yearly basis as technology changes and as processes change. And this pace of change is so fast that actually a lot of small businesses are having trouble keeping up. The finding was that the larger businesses, and this makes intuitive sense, the bigger businesses with more resources are just better equipped at training their workers and integrating this technology into their processes. And so what's happening is there's a growing disparity between the firms that can keep up with this change and the firms that don't have the resources or don't have the manpower or don't potentially have the expertise. And our findings were that Massachusetts would have to either retrain or recruit 40,000 workers a year just to keep up with this technological change. And to give that just a little bit of perspective, that's well over twice what our current capacity is. I mean, in Mass Development can chime in here, but this is more than twice what our current capacity is at our Mass Hire Centers, at our community colleges, at our voc ed and job training programs. Another point that was very important that the commission found is we're increasingly seeing a split economy. Now, we've seen this for a long time, and it's been a trend for a long time, but COVID exacerbated it and poured gasoline on it in a very big way. You're seeing a kind of separation between what, lack of a better term, you would describe as hybrid work and work that has to be done in person. And the hybrid work tends to correlate along professional services, college educated. It is disproportionately white and disproportionately male. And the in-person work, think about daycare centers, education, healthcare workers, manufacturing workers, is disproportionately people of color and immigrants, people without college degrees, and trends more disproportionately towards women. So what you're seeing is a growing separation between people who have the flexibility to work from home or do hybrid, integrate technology into their workplaces, and are gaining the benefits of all that productivity improvements through higher wages. And then another group of workers, for lack of a better term, the in-person workforce, that's falling further and further behind. And this is an urgent challenge because it correlates along race, along gender, along education, all types of other very important metrics that are continuing to create divisions in our state. And probably the most important finding, and I think one of the most unique, was we started the commission's work really focusing on work, right? What does work look like? What does the factory floor look like? What does the restaurant, server's experience look like? What does the office look like? But what we increasingly found is what both employees and employers were telling us is more than perhaps any time before. And I'd be curious if your membership and your companies have experienced this, It's what's called those work adjacent issues, what we call work adjacent issues, that are increasingly at the forefront of what the future of work is going to look like and what's creating stress for people. One of the absolute top was housing. Uh, we are expected to have a shortfall of 200,000 housing units by 2030. Mass development knows this well, and it is creating immense stress for people. It's contributing to the worker shortages because businesses can't find employees who can afford stable housing close to their employment. And it's also adding immense stress to a second item that was brought up again and again, which is transportation. As housing prices and rents go up, people have to live farther and farther away. Their commutes get longer. Again, this is correlated with more in-person work where people can't work by Zoom. That continues to add stress to the public transit system where it exists, certainly roads and highways where it doesn't, and that exacerbates the congestion and everything else. So transportation was another key issue that needs to be taken on. A few that are maybe less prominent in the news. One that came up also, and as a parent of 3 young kids, I sympathize with this, is childcare. The state really is in a childcare crisis. The system was immensely stressed before COVID, but just to give you a sense of some of the statistics, there are 740,000 children in Massachusetts under the age of 14 who either live in a one-parent household or in a household where both caretakers work. This is important because state law actually requires children under 14 to have some level of supervision, even after the school day, which ends around 2:45. There are, across the entire system in our state, about 225,000 licensed slots. That's everything. That's Head Start, that's home daycare, that's after school slots, that's private pay slots. So it's no wonder that we have this sort of Hunger Games situation of the potential demand being 740,000 and the slots being, 200 less than 250,000, a small fraction of what the demand is. And it's led to skyrocketing prices and shortages. The workforce is burned out and is very underpaid. And this is going to require a very focused plan on the part of the state to address. Just a couple more things, because I know we want to get to questions. Something else that came up a lot is mental health. And this was a little bit of a surprise to the commission, because again, our orientation at the start was more on like kind of the nuts and bolts of work. But it's becoming increasingly clear that technology has worn people down, that the pace of change in the workplace has been hard for people, especially workers that might not speak English as their first language, or might not be intuitive with technology, because again, remember, there's now an expectation that almost every type of worker is constantly keeping themselves updated with all of these new technologies, and of course these other issues, the childcare, the transportation, the inflation, is contributing to a great degree of stress. And our commission really found that that's contributing to the turnover in workplaces, which is now also contributing to the shortages and is contributing to all the other issues. And when you have attrition and when you have people leave, it adds even more stress to the workers who stay, which spirals the mental health challenges even more. And then 2 last items. Digital access was a very big issue on a lot of dimensions. About half of the gateway cities in Massachusetts, or excuse me, about half the residents of our Massachusetts gateway cities, which would include Taunton, do not have regular access to a desktop computer. There are digital gaps across several planes for people to think about. We still have communities in Massachusetts that do not have broadband internet at all. It's a shrinking list, but there are communities in Western Mass that do not have high-speed hookups at all. The communities that do have hookups, which are the vast majority of communities in the state, it's an open question whether the connection is affordable, whether the connection is high quality, and whether the connection is stable, especially for low-income people and low-income families. And this has become especially important because almost all of the large businesses in Massachusetts now, as a first step for job applications, require digital. And then the third piece of this, which was interesting, is just because somebody is hooked up and has a connection, they might not necessarily have the equipment. So in Springfield, for example, a third of families did not have a desktop or laptop computer. They were mainly using only a smartphone to access the internet. And even if they have the equipment, have the hookup, and can afford it, there are large gaps in fluency in terms of how to use software and how to actually make the most of the connections, because schools often are not teaching digital literacy. People that might not be educated or might not speak English as a first language are having trouble navigating it. So it's something that increasingly we need to have a plan around. And then finally, diversity and inclusion came up again and again. Workers want diverse workplaces. There's an expectation now that workplaces make an effort towards diversity and also work to include, previously underrepresented groups, certainly along racial lines, gender lines, and also disability and handicap. The new remote work and new technology innovations, if properly applied, could do a lot to close gaps and to close disparities. But unfortunately, for now, they're exacerbating and they're heightening the disparities that already existed, in part because the tools are not being applied in the right types of ways. I'll close by saying it's not all doom and gloom. In fact, one of the things that we found is, in many respects, Massachusetts is a victim of its own success. We have a dynamic economy. We have all of these incredible institutions. Our economy is growing fast. The challenge is, how do we expand and include that net of growth to more people and to more places? And how do we handle these adjacent issues, the congestion, the mental health challenges, the housing challenges, the childcare challenges, in a way that allows people to continue to move up that ladder and experience fulfilling employment? And we absolutely have the tools to, all of these things are fixable with plans and with good policies. And so, we kind of close on saying, we have the resources, we have the economy, we have the know-how, we have good models of what works around the state. The question is, how do we scale and apply those, in a really significant way? Sorry to go on so long, but yeah, happy to take questions and have a conversation.
Thank you very much, Senator Lessa. So now I will open it up for folks who may have a question.
I think Valerie's got it. I'll let you call on people, Chris, or I can call.
Not so much a question, but noticing that since the rail from New Bedford going through Middleborough, going all the way up, everywhere you go along the rail, Plymouth, Kingston, Middleborough, they're building huge amount of apartments to try to bring in new workers, middle or low income workers as well. And I understand that, well, maybe Jay knows a whole lot more about this than I do. But if towns won't do that, I think the state's going to be more demanding to do that, to allow for that growth of workforce.
Yeah, Valerie, the program you're referring to, I believe, is called the MBTA Communities Program. It was legislation that was passed in the legislature about 2 years ago. The idea here is to help require or encourage what's called transit-oriented development, or denser development that's walkable near mass transit, so that you're opening more housing units, helping relieve the pressure on the housing market, and also doing it in a green and environmentally friendly way, because people can use the train to get in and out of the city or to get to and from their jobs. This is going to be a really important tool for helping get housing prices under control and helping give more options to people, to have good, high quality places to live. It does present some challenges for communities, including congestion, traffic mitigation, help with the school system. So this is a place where the state really needs to play a very proactive role with communities. So we want South Coast Rail. This is a very important piece of economic opportunity for the South Coast. We certainly want more housing and more opportunity for people, but we've got to manage the stress of that growth in a way that keeps communities supported, The MassWorks program, for example, can be used to help support infrastructure. You've got to make sure that it's done at a scale that the community can really absorb and utilize. You've got to support the schools as you see that growth. So these are challenges that we've got to work through in the coming years.
Yeah, just as a follow-on of that, we've in Taunton, we consider the South Coast Rail an intra-regional rail opportunity for more workers to come between the big cities in southeastern Mass, Fall River, New Bedford, Taunton, and where it's always been just express bus in recent years. This way, they unfortunately, Taunton's left with just one station in toward the eastern side of the city, but it will allow we already have a process for our local bus service to pick up folks and take them throughout the city. So we just would like to make sure that the state is understanding South Coast Rail is not all about going to Boston, that it is important to have employee access throughout our region, which will cut their commute substantially and lead them to more job opportunities throughout the three city area especially.
Yeah, Dick, I really appreciate you bringing that up because you're right. A lot of the coverage, especially the kind of statewide coverage, describes this as a way to shuttle people back and forth, right, from the South Coast in and out of Boston. But you're exactly right. It's also going to be a tool for people to get from Taunton to Fall River or Taunton to New Bedford or within the South Coast region as a whole. I have some familiarity with this because it's a similar dynamic where I am. Springfield, Chicopee, and Holyoke, for example, all border each other along the Connecticut River. Northampton is just north of Holyoke. So that corridor, the Northampton, Holyoke, Springfield, Chicopee corridor, and then if you include Hartford, which is just to the south of us, just like Providence is close to you, that area is actually the second largest metropolitan area in New England. After Greater Boston, if you include Hartford. And we've done work to create what's called the Valley Flyer Line, which is a north-south train route that goes up and down the Connecticut River. And what we found is there's a significant amount of passenger volume between Hartford and Springfield, between Springfield and Northampton, between Northampton and Hartford. And it's similar. We want to try to create clusters of regions, right, where people can get around more easily. And that's a really important element to also reducing these tensions around traffic and housing prices. Because if people can stay within their communities and get around more easily in places where they've grown up and that are more affordable, you're going to reduce that red hot pressure on the housing market.
Sure. One of the things too that we're experiencing that's, I guess, going to be increasing tenfold come January is office space availability. I know we've seen some of the office spaces already become vacant, but they're saying there's going to be a huge tide come January 1st of office space becoming available, even more so than what we're seeing now. So we're getting a lot of requests for renovating office space into apartments, which makes sense, but it's something you're going to see a lot of in the coming years. A lot of this office space, people don't want to work in offices anymore. So a lot of these buildings, I mean, I went to a Fall River one where 4 floors that are empty in a main drag in Fall River. So it's just, that's one of the things too, that you'll be seeing a lot more of in the year to come, is a lot of office space is going to be coming available, and the need to renovate and figure out a new use for it. So definitely apartments is the key for that.
No, Jay, I appreciate you bringing that up, and mass development is going to be a very important partner in addressing that. Frankly, I think that the sort of the old model of high-rise office building or even like a suburban office campus, they're going to be for our generation what abandoned mill buildings were for a previous generation. The model of work has changed. I mean, you're in the South Coast. I'm in Western Mass. I mean, we used to have thousands and thousands of workers going in and out of huge mill buildings, huge factories to do their work. Many of those buildings are still empty. You can imagine a similar fate, not to be gloomy, but you can imagine a similar fate for these large office parks. And we need a plan around that because it's going to be a significant, it already has been a significant change in how people work, but it's going to have significant consequences for communities in terms of taxes. These are important property tax bases for communities. Also the businesses, the dry cleaners, the sandwich shops that, there were ecosystems around those office buildings that are also in jeopardy. And to your point, Jay, about transitioning them to housing, that's got to happen. We're in a housing shortage, but it's not necessarily cheap or intuitive to transfer an office building into an apartment building. For example, you don't have showers and bathrooms. You don't have the plumbing and the HVAC infrastructure that you would need for an apartment. So it's a costly proposition, and it's something that the state really does need to be thinking through.
I have a question. You had mentioned the digital gap and digital literacy earlier on. Has there been any discussion about maybe increasing programs in schools or outside of schools to help address those to, new hires? Because we've definitely run into some of those issues when we're looking at candidates.
Yeah, so I think it's got to be multifaceted. The schools have to play a really important role. Just one example, we went through a little bit of a test case of this with COVID, when a lot of districts literally dropped Chromebooks off to all their students. And a not insignificant number of the students in many of the districts never opened it because, they can track, who logs in and who doesn't log in, which I think is a signal of how far the gaps are, right, in terms of know-how and ability to really utilize these tools. So we really need to start in kindergarten, right, and integrate into school curriculums, digital literacy from the start. But we also have a challenge around people who are beyond school age,
Right.
who might be immigrants, might be people who work with their hands and didn't necessarily have access to technology. And it's in some ways a bigger challenge to reach that community. So we've worked with public libraries. I'm the chair of our libraries caucus in the Senate. Libraries are a really important tool because you have almost every community has them. People can come into the library, get training, get support with job applications, maybe get additional training as they go. But we've got to, this was in our report, we've got to do this at scale now, because we just can't have a situation. Not being able to use a computer or navigate digital tools is the equivalent in some respects of a different generation not being able to read. You can't really function in the economy, especially where the economy is going, if you don't have some basic fluency in all of these digital systems.
Yeah, just follow on your mill comment. In recent years, we had changed the industrial zones to business zones around our mill complexes. And because of the need to have multiple uses in those sold complexes, where it's 500,000 square feet, some to be torn down and rebuilt, some to be totally removed. We're starting finally to see some interest in affordable market rate housing in our older industrial areas, industrial commercial areas. So I was talking to our planning district about federal funds, economic development administration funds. And while there's money available for commercial and industrial infrastructure improvements, I think we will, for the residential developments, we will have to depend on Mass Works more for improvements to the sewer and water access systems to these older parts of the city, so that we can have larger 300-400 apartment complexes in those areas. But is Mass Works currently employed or used for residential projects as well as commercial?
It's generally commercial, but it can be used for multi-use residential development as well, especially the wraparound infrastructure, the intersections, the sewer lines, all of that. There's also a new program called One Stop Development Program, which is run through EOHED, which streamlines all the various permitting and incentive programs into one sort of common application. And I would really encourage people to take a look at that at EOHED in Secretary Mike Keneally's office. And your local delegation, state senators, state reps can also help you navigate that and advocate for that. And if we can be a resource, we can certainly help point you in the direction of where that program is.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if it's just something Jay can answer or maybe you, Senator Lesser. What are the trends of pricing for office space in the future? Or how do you see that changing with all the changes that are going on that Jay talked about?
Well, Jay is probably better equipped at this to answer this than me, but you are seeing rents either staying stable or going down, especially the sort of core downtown commercial. Some commercial is still very, very hot, including anything around distribution centers, warehousing, also healthcare, and anything touching sort of elder care. But your sort of traditional kind of cubicle filled floors, of sort of traditional commercial office space is a sector that is increasingly in distress, especially in sort of secondary and suburban markets. There's always going to be a demand, for high rent, high visibility space, in sort of marquee addresses and locations, but we're especially seeing those suburban office parks, those sort of secondary markets of traditional commercial space under stress.
Thank you.
Senator, I was wondering what's next? So, the commission submitted the report, and I'm just, with all of these initiatives that, the recommendations that have been put forward, what is the next step now to starting to look into further and implement some of these changes?
Well, I think the idea is that this is integrated into really all the policy making that both the governor does, the legislature does, and local communities do moving forward. So for example, we just did a significant transportation bill that includes potential expansion of rail service to Western Mass, to Springfield and Pittsfield, addressing some of these issues around transportation, improving rideshare services and support for regional transit authorities, also in line with this. We also have an economic development bill pending with significant housing investments, including expansion of the HDIP program, which I know has been used quite a lot on the South Coast to help spur market rate housing in Fall River and in Taunton and New Bedford. And then, the childcare issue is very significant. We also passed last week a comprehensive mental health bill that, among other things, is going to require insurance companies to fully pay for at least one mental health check a year. The same way you get your physical covered, an annual physical for your physical health care, there will now be a mental health check that people will be able to get once a year, fully paid for. The idea here is to just help with the connectivity, help spot problems, help get people referred to additional care. It also is going to create a reimbursement parity for mental health services and for physical health services, which is really important. The Senate tried to do a large childcare measure this session. It didn't get done, although we did in this year's budget pretty dramatically expand childcare funding and stabilization funding for our existing daycare centers and childcare centers. So they are seeing a bump in one-time kind of stabilization money to help them kind of recover from what happened with COVID. But moving forward, we've got to structurally expand childcare, which means a lot more training of teachers, boosting pay of teachers so that we can recruit more people, and physical expansion of the centers themselves, because we're at capacity in a lot of places around classes and buildings and things like that.
Any other questions from our viewing audience? Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for being on the call this morning. Thank you so much for your time, Senator Lesser. We really appreciate that. Thank you to our co-hosts at the Cranberry Country Chamber as well, and wish everybody a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks for
you,
having me. Keep
Senator,
in
and thank
touch.
you all.
Thank
See
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.